Now, to those of you that don't know what the red pill is, it is a reference to the Matrix when Neo was presented with the blue pill and the blue pill being one that allows you to stay blissfully, asleep and in the indoctrination machine, if you will. And the red pill wakes you up and to the reality of the cold hard truth of the world and other such things. But as it pertains to the manosphere, it's a branch of the manosphere that came out during the pickup artist era. So already the roots of such a movement are already toxic because its foundation is meaningless and based off of nothingness. But nevertheless, it's a branch of the manosphere as it pertains to the reality of male and female, sexual nature and the dating marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. Now, although this video is going to be about essentially talking about the folly and how disgusting this really is for men and women in society at large, they do get some things correct, and I'm almost kind of tired of talking about what they get correct, because it is just a sign of the times where we live in such a fatherless generation, a generation that has so rejected our Lord Jesus Christ and his teachings, that we need these things spelled out by a movement that is, I think, wholeheartedly designed for man's carnal nature, man's sinful nature, and will drag many, many souls to hell. How do I know this? I know this because I lived that life for a number of years. And this is not me just merely pontificating or talking merely theoretically, because I was one of those guys that unfortunately lived that life. But by the grace of God, I've been delivered from that. And so these basic truths are that we live in a gynocentric world order. We live in a world that's kind of dominated by feminism. Masculinity has been systematically, defanged and devalued and subverted. And we live in a fatherless generation. There's a male loneliness epidemic, all of which are true, but it doesn't really take this movement to really make you understand that these things are a reality. Now, at the time when I was in my, early 20s, late teens, when I first discovered this, because I wasn't raised with a strong and virtuous father, the red pill did teach me these things. The problem is all the prescriptions and the alleged solutions that came along with it. Spin multiple plates, meaning, sleep with multiple women, have many in rotation, and when they eventually develop feelings for you, eventually just kind of discard them like waste and just replace it with another, flesh toy, which, obviously is dishonoring of the dignity of the person and other such things, but yeah, just discard them and move on. And that's how life continues to move on in perpetuity. Never get married, don't have children, maximize your sexual marketplace value, your SMV, grow in wealth, hit the gym. And again, some of these things are not inherently bad. You want to build your business, continue to grow in wealth, you want to hit the gym. All of these things, though, are solely focused on the procurement of more concubines, essentially. What's really funny about this is that the red pill likes to bash on feminism while also playing into one of the many branches of feminism, which is free love, in that you can just kind of sleep around and without any kind of worry of any sort of, commitment or children, et cetera, et cetera. So you can just go free reign without any sort of responsibility or accountability. And it's this rejection or this disdain for female nature. See, a lot of these guys will say, well, hey, I don't hate women, Mike. I just realize what they are, without realizing what they are. It's like the sin nature that they hate in women, as a result of a post-lapsarian world, the nature of Eve. They fail to realize in themselves as, descendants of Adam, our common forefather. And so taking all of these things, what did it do for me? And what is the cold, hard reality of the red pill for men? Well, what did it do for me? It was a spiral into nothingness that eventually, I stared long enough into the void, and eventually it stared back at me. That's what it was. And at the heart of it, I always desired one woman and a family and children, but I'd become so brainwashed by this idea that, hey, no matter who the woman is, how virtuous she is, she's going to monkey branch, she's going to branch swing, she's going to, eventually cheat on me with somebody that's a higher SMV than I am. Or she's going to, crush me in divorce court, or any number of doomer ideas. So instead of that, I see society in decline, or I saw society in decline, and by many measures, and if you look at it, yeah, society is in decline. The only thing that can really save it is Jesus Christ. But eventually, it got me to the point that I was so desolate that I wanted the embrace of death. I wanted to delete myself. I knew that this was contrary to how God had designed me. I vaguely professed Christ during this time, but I said, I'm doing all of the things that this movement prescribes, right? I was, building a successful business, I was in really good shape, seeing different women, which pains me to say this. It pains me to say this because I don't want to relive this stuff. We got to be very careful how we talk about it in order not to glorify past sin, but this is the reality of it. And if my testimony can help another man drag himself out of the pit of this sort of worldview, then that's totally fine. My humiliation can lead to your sanctification by the glory and the grace of our Lord Jesus. Great, fantastic. And there was just this gnawing voice in my spirit. And so we have to really pay attention to what is our conscience saying? And I was trying to ignore it. And through sin, there's a darkness of will, darkness of intellect, etc. So it was hard for me to actually identify that this voice and this depression was coming from me living in a way that was contrary to the soul, contrary to the teachings of Mother Church. And so why does this all come up for me now? Well, there was a viral thread on X, which was actually, the comments were quite hopeful. It kind of restored some faith in humanity, that things are shifting in such a way where people are understanding the folly of this kind of lifestyle. And there was a guy named World Wingman, and he was talking about how he had slept with over 300 women across different places in the world, how he had maximized his SMV, maximized his approach with women on these dating apps, et cetera, all of these things. And this phrase, I can't help but bring it to mind. This is no more, and this is the reality of the red pill that many guys don't want to face, is that this is no more than the GAY, the Skittles cruiser lifestyle for straight men. It's contraceptive sex. These men treat themselves and other women like, flesh toys, genetic dead ends. And there's a point of clarification that's needed there. When I say genetic dead end, this is not a reference to our clergy that have consecrated themselves in chastity to the church. That's a completely different vocation. Those men, or even those women, but especially as it pertains to men, because I'm speaking to men here, those men are patriarchs in a different way because they're taking care of the flock. They have consecrated themselves to the church. So just an important point of distinction, because I've said this on podcasts and people have kind of railed me for it, and justly so. I am not talking about those men that have taken a very specific vow of celibacy, which is a higher calling than those of us that are part of the lay patriarchy, if you will, those of us with families, wives and children, etc. But the red pill lifestyle is no more than the GAY, the Skittles alphabet person cruiser lifestyle for straight men. I mean, if you really think about it, it is no different than that, except you are just happen to do it with women, and you're not violating the natural law in the same way that they are. There's certainly, it's worse. It's still sin, but that other lifestyle is worse. But nevertheless, the same concepts still apply here. You're using contraception, and a lot of times there's abortion. And there's these, it's the act without the end. It's not procreative. It's not unitive. So what is it? It's masturbatory. And so there's this line, in the world is in decline, so just ride the wave down. Well, in riding the decline, you become the decline. And I've had to learn this phrase very personally, and I've had to learn it well. And I had to really touch the stove to know that it was hot. That you either follow God's law or you break yourself against it. The trouble is, some of these guys are not privy to the signal graces God gives them along the way of living such a degenerate lifestyle. I truly believe God pangs us all in the conscience, over and over and over again, until he just kind of gives us up and over to our sin. But, it's funny that same grace that we reject is the same grace that brings us back. And so my message to all the young men that may be fatherless or maybe find it somewhat alluring to do something like this, there's nothing for you there, because you are nothing more than a spiritual alphabet person, a spiritual homo sapien, in the words of my good friend Tim Gordon. I'm sure you can read between the lines. Try to do so I can, this video stays up, of course. That's not how God designed us to be. Of course not. God did not design us to treat ourselves and other people like human flesh puppets. And there's something that I think is not often spoken about. This is something that I experienced myself in the throes of such a lifestyle, is that when I finally met my wife, who's a very high quality woman, who's an incredible woman, wife, mother, etc. And I could see that even in the degeneracy I was living, I could see that in her. But what happened the first little bit that we were dating is that I could not accept actual love from a good woman. I had been so busy treating myself like, a flesh puppet, and treating myself like an object and other people like an object, that I felt that was all I was good for. That's all I was good for. And I firmly believe I was living such a lifestyle to fill a sort of God-sized hole in my heart. And I was unrepentant, and that was the only thing that I knew, and it felt good. Well, what often feels good will send you to hell, and the gates of hell will be filled with men with unrepentant sexual sin. But there's nothing virtuous about just maximizing your SMV with no purpose other than using other women, other people as a flesh puppet. And God did not call you to live like a spiritual homo sapien. He called you for greatness. He called you for chastity. He called you for self-denial. He called you for humility. And if he didn't call you to the clergy to consecrate yourself to the church, then he called you to the lay patriarchy to build a family, to love one woman. Because what does it serve you if this is the life that you've lived? And it's really, really funny because these guys take a purely biological view to this, and maybe some of them haven't come around to the reality of the truth that is God and the created order, and it's purely just, well, spread your seed because you're Genghis Khan. That doesn't follow. It doesn't follow, because we are hylomorphic beings. We're both form and matter. And these guys become so darkened by their sin, they don't realize the pangs on their conscience. And in fact, I think so many of them are living this in a sort of performative way. They're so used to this Skittles cruiser lifestyle because it feels so good. They don't understand self-denial. And what's really funny too is there's this disdain and hatred of female nature when their whole lives are built around succumbing to their own concupiscence, but also wanting females. And so it's like, on one hand, you're complaining that there are too many, hoes, while you're out there being a homemaker. You're complaining about female nature, while the fact that you go to the gym, that you're building wealth, and all these things are simply centered around procuring more females. So what is it? You've been given over to a reprobate mind. This is why you do things in contrary to how God wants you to live. And you're going to go and perpetuating a problem that you're also complaining about. And you want to lay in bed with more of the thing that you hate. You hate female nature. Well, you should hate your own nature first, because it's allowed all this stuff to perpetuate. And so I'm here to tell you that it is the GAY cruiser lifestyle for straight men. You're just simply not violating the natural law like Skittles people are, but you are doing the very same thing, and it is providing, or it is contributing to societal rot. And there's going to be a lot of these men in the comments that are going to be saying many such things, but they make no sense because they're so entrenched in their sin. And I have this sympathy toward them because I was one of those men as well. So, I don't want to come down too hard on those guys that are in the throes of that lifestyle. I want to have a conversation though. So if this is you, and you're understanding that there is a treachery or a folly in this type of lifestyle, reach out to me. This is precisely the impetus and why I started on social media a number of years ago. Anyways, was I was on the not on the heels of the lifestyle. I shouldn't say that because I was already married with one child. I have 3 now, but I'd gotten myself out of that by the grace of God. My wife helped me get out of that by the grace of God, and I realized that the true, good, and the beautiful, the way that I was supposed to be living, was a chaste life, a life of self-denial, a life of monogamy, a life of dedication and vocation to my wife and my children. And so I've lived both lifestyles. And I can tell you, when I was living that red pill lifestyle, there was nothing but sorrow and desolation and, regret, and confusion, because I was living in the way that these guys had prescribed. And many are going to say that I wasn't living the red pill lifestyle, otherwise I wouldn't be sad. Well, I think there's a truth of a formed conscience. And even if in my darkness of my intellect and in my will, there was this pang, because I grew up knowing Jesus and I fell away from it, but I grew up knowing him. So there was this informed, at least a bit of my conscience was informed. Of course, it's more formed now, but even then. And so many of these men, I think, are in denial, whether because they're darkened by their sin or because they're just simply ignoring the fact that, hey, I actually do want one woman and I do want a family, but I'm afraid. And if you're afraid, that's fine. Admit that you're afraid. And from there, you can rebuild by the grace of God. But many of these guys are in denial, completely in denial. And most of these red pill figureheads, if you will, Rollo Tomasi and all these other men, just want to sell you something. That's all they care about doing. They don't actually care about you. The guys that care about you are not afraid of offending your flesh, but because we care for your soul, charity is willing the good of the other. These men just want to sell you an ebook or, some course on how to pick up more women. So you're further entrenched in their sin and you can stay in their funnel so they can continue to profit off of your suffering. That's it. So which way, Western man? We want to talk about the decline of society. Then who is going to rebuild it? If it's not us, if it's not a chaste, self-denying, humble, God-fearing generation of men. Are we going to allow this to perpetuate? Are we going to continue to complain about feminism while contributing to feminism, the proliferation of these feminist ideologies or these different sort of branches of feminism? Are we going to continue to contribute to this problem of female hypergamy, right? The tendency for women to, branch swing up to the next rung of male sexual marketplace value, creating more hoes while still complaining about them. And when is enough going to be enough? And I see this thing kind of going by the wayside now as more and more men are coming to the realization that they need to take up their cross and live chastely, which is beautiful. But there's still some factions of, society in general where this needs to be purged. So which way, Western man? Is it the way of the cross or is it the way of this Skittles cruiser lifestyle? You tell me. What do you think you're going to inherit in the afterlife? What do you think you're going to inherit when you're 50, 60, 70 years old and you're alone? You've got no kids, you've got no wife, you've got nobody by your side while, your SMV will eventually go down unless you're paying women to be around you, which is sad in and of itself and on its own. Which way? You answer that question. That's it. I could rant about this all day long. But remember, guys that are living that lifestyle, you're no different than a Skittles, and you're playing right into the feminist agenda, and that is free love. What's it going to be? So for those guys that are wanting to unplug from that lifestyle, or for Catholic men wanting fitness, coaching, mentorship, etc., I'm going to leave my application in the description box. I also got an apparel brand for my fellow Catholic gym goers. I'll leave that in the description box. But above all, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Glory to Jesus Christ.